Hello, my name's Giles Milton, and this is my new book, Wolfram, the Boy Who Went to War, which is published in February. Wolfram's my father-in-law, and he was brought up under the Third Reich. I'd always wondered what he'd done in the war, but never really plucked up the courage to ask him. And it only really came about when my daughter, aged 7, was set a school project to design a heraldic shield that represented something, the most important element in her family. And Madeline, as I said, being only aged 7, designed her heraldic shield with a massive swastika on it. At which point my wife and I said to Madeline, well, maybe not, because it wasn't quite like that. Because in fact, Wolfram had an amazing story to tell from the Third Reich. Wolfram's story is a really fascinating one because he came from a very eccentric family of bohemian artists who immediately fell outside the Third Reich regime. They detested Hitler and they were to suffer under the years of the Third Reich. Wolfram himself was an artist, a very sensitive individual who had no time whatsoever for Hitler. But unfortunately, in the Third Reich, there was no opting out. In 1942, he was conscripted into the Reich Labour Service and sent straight to the Eastern Front, to his mother's absolute dismay. While he was there, he was fortunate to get diphtheria and was so ill, in fact he very nearly died, that he avoided being sent to Stalingrad. He recuperated, but as soon as he was better, he was sent to Normandy, and there he was to have first-hand experience, and a very violent experience, of being at the receiving end of D-Day. I'd never considered a D-Day or even the Second World War from the German point of view. What was it like for these young German soldiers? And after all, they were only 16, 17, 18 years old. What was it like for them to be at the receiving end of the greatest amphibious invasion in the history of warfare? Well, Wolfram tells it as it is. Wolfram's story at war is just a part of the book. The other thing that really fascinated me was what happened to the families who were left behind, who were there in Germany, who were living under the Third Reich. So luckily we had an enormous wealth of material in the family archives, letters, diaries. They kept absolutely everything. So I was able to piece together what life was like in a small provincial town in Germany under the Third Reich. Visits from the Gestapo, all sorts of book burnings, all sorts of terrible things happening. And of course, the most terrible thing of all for Wolfram and his family was when in 1945, close to the war's end, the town where they lived, the town of Pforzheim, was completely and utterly destroyed in an RAF bombardment. And among the 18,000 people killed were many of their family and friends. Wolfram himself had the fortune to be captured. He wanted to be captured by the Americans, and he ended up as a prisoner first in England, and then he was transported to America, where he was a prisoner for a year and a half. He knew nothing of what had taken place in his hometown. There were no letters. He didn't hear anything from his parents for a year and a half. So it was only when he got home that he discovered that the town, his childhood town, had been completely obliterated. So he was able to recount things exactly as they happened. And some of the details are really harrowing, like when he arrived on a train in Brest-Litovsk, and he describes these emaciated Jews hanging around the station, and when all the German army, the German soldiers chucked discarded their cans of food out of the windows, he just talks about these starving people running for the cans and licking out any food they can get out of them. It's things like that so bring the story to life. There are hundreds of books published every year about the Second World War. Is there anything really new that can be said? Well, I hope that this book fills a gap, that it tells a story from a German point of view. What was it like for the Germans living under Hitler and living in a country at war?